Good evening. Welcome to the first planning board meeting in May of the town of Kennebunkport. It's two items on the agenda this evening, but we'll start by taking attendance. There's 4 of us this evening. George is out. Other than that, 4 in attendance. Did everyone have a chance to look at the minutes that were distributed? That's a yes all around. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion to approve, was that? Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Mike, you okay? 4-0 approved. So begin with item number 1, which is 250401. Stone Road subdivision, application by Snapdragon Properties LLC.
Good evening, folks.
Michael, nice to see you.
Nice to see you all. You don't want to block yourself, though. Here you go.
Hi, good evening. My name's Mike Tadema-Wieland. I'm a civil engineer with Teradyne Consultants. I'm here with Howard Schultz and his son Ben. The owner and applicant for this project is Snapdragon Properties LLC. And just for the record, Snapdragon is wholly owned by Howard and his wife. And so Snapdragon owns this parcel off Stone Road. It is about just shy of 18 and a half acres. I'll note there was a typo on the cover letter that I submitted. I think it was 20. I think I reported 20 point something. It's actually 18.42.
So it's correct on the application
Yes.
itself?
Yeah. It's entirely undeveloped today and forested. The wetlands have been surveyed and vernal pools have been located out there. There are 2.5 acres of wetlands on the 18.5 acres, as well as two vernal pools. Snapdragon purchased this in April of 2023, is for the record, and Howard and Victoria's goal here is to create up to 4 lots and gift them to their children. They'd like to create sort of a family compound, if you will. I think there's been some other projects in town where families have done similar things. When done that way, I think most of you are probably aware that these created lots are exempt from the state subdivision law. Of course, if certain criteria are met, if it's done the correct way.
To be clear, they're treated specially by the subdivision law. They're mentioned in the subdivision law. They're a special case.
They're mentioned as exemptions.
As a special case, that's right. They don't.
Exactly.
A lot of the other criteria doesn't apply.
Correct. Yep. In order to create these lots, of course, they need to meet all the dimensional requirements of the town zoning ordinance. They need frontage, of course, on a public or private way, and they need access, obviously. And so we're here with this application, and I know this is called a subdivision, but again, it's not a subdivision application. This is what we're here for tonight is a site plan application for a new road. And the road, the proposed road is just over 1,000 linear feet. As shown on the plan, it's 1,027 linear feet. In accordance with the zoning ordinance, a road serving 4 lots, it has to, in this case, it has a 50-foot wide right-of-way, 20 feet wide of paved surface. This proposed road also has 2-foot grass shoulders on either side and drainage swales on either side. And it terminates in a hammerhead turnaround. And the ordinance allows for either a hammerhead or a cul-de-sac. Hammerhead is much simpler, takes up a lot less space, a lot less impact, so that's what's proposed here. And then beyond the hammerhead is shown an additional approximately 400 linear feet of a shared driveway. So it's the intent to create two lots in the back of the parcel. Those 2 lots will have frontage on the 50-foot wide right-of-way. They'll have enough frontage to meet the dimensional requirement, but access will come off this shared driveway that's essentially an extension of that road. The shared driveway is in a 50-foot easement, which is greater than the ordinance requires. I think the ordinance requires a 22 or maybe, I think it's a 22. And the shared driveway is proposed to be 12 feet wide. As it's designed, we believe it meets all the technical requirements outlined in the subdivision ordinance. And the ordinances are a little confusing, at least to me, because there are these sort of road criteria in the zoning ordinance, which this clearly falls under, but there's much greater detail on design requirements in the subdivision ordinance. So we've taken those, and even though this isn't technically under review under the subdivision ordinance, we've designed it in accordance with those standards, with 2 exceptions, and those are what I want to point out here. One of them, in fact, the zoning ordinance calls for side slopes outside of the travelway, that slopes that make up the ditch, to be 3 to 1. So 3 horizontal feet to 1 vertical foot. In this case, we will propose to do 3 to 1 slopes from the edge of the shoulder down to the bottom of the ditch. There'll be a 1-foot wide ditch and 2 to 1 slopes back up to existing grade. And the purpose of that is there are some, especially at the beginning of the road, there are some significant cuts, and so it just reduces the width of the impact essentially. So you can clear a narrower swath in order to build the same road. And where a 3 to 1 slope is considered a recoverable slope if your tires were to go off the road, and that will still exist. This is on the back side of the ditch, so very little chance of a car being over there, hopefully. And then the second spot, we would request that the board allow for 2 to 1 slopes is in the wetland crossing. So the shared driveway will cross a wetland, and the 2 to 1 slope, again, it will allow for a narrower swath to cut through that wetland, resulting in less wetland impacts. And that's a fairly typical design element that we utilize when we cross wetlands. The other potential deviation from, or the other deviation from the technical standards, and this is in the subdivision ordinance. The subdivision ordinance calls for a maximum of 3% slope from the beginning of the road, which in this case would be where it intersects with Stone Road. So the road has to be no more than 3% for 75 feet, and then it can either climb at a steeper rate or drop at a steeper rate. Where this road immediately will climb into a fairly steep hill, we're asking to reduce that length of 3% from 75 feet to 25 feet. And that gives you more than the length of of one vehicle. And with expected such low traffic volumes, we think that's acceptable, and it really greatly reduces the amount of cut that will go into that first several hundred feet.
Mike, how steep will it be, the first 25 feet?
Good question.
If not 3%, then what?
So this is the plan, and this is the plan and profile, which is also in your sheet. So we're proposing to hold 3% for 25 feet and then transition into a 10%. That transition happens over, let me read the plan here. That transition happens over 100 feet. So you'll get to that 10% slope will start 125 feet in. So the first 25 feet is 3%, and then there's a 100-foot transition from 3% to 10% proposed. And again, maybe the board can provide some guidance here. I'm a little unclear whether or not those subdivision technical standards apply here or are guidance, or because again, as I understand it, we're not under the subdivision regulations. So, I mean, I will say they're good practices, and like I said, we've done everything we can to meet them with this one exception.
And I'm happy to hear from Nadia or Galen if he's listening in on that, but my understanding is those regulations don't strictly apply. We have in the past, on subdivision reviews, given relaxations on the 3-to-1 versus 2-to-1 in cases very similar to the ones you're talking about. The only concern I'd have here, and I ask the other members, is 10%'s a pretty steep grade. And I'm thinking it's winter. What do y'all think about the safety concerns?
Yeah, I mean, 10% is relatively steep. It's
steeper than a highway is gonna let you.
Sure, I mean, 10% is the maximum allowed under the subdivision ordinance.
Understand.
So, it's a common sort of maximum you see in a lot of these design manuals. So is it relatively steep? Yeah. Would we prefer less steep? Yeah, but you can see on the profile we're heading right into an area of fairly significant cut. So the trade-off is that when you flatten it out, you're cutting a lot more through that hill in order to get the road to
You've
work.
thought about snow management?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else got a thought on that?
Only thought I had on that is, what would the runoff of rainwater be with that short an initial grade onto the street?
Yep, so of course the road will be pitched, and so water's designed to run off into the ditches on the side of the road. Of course, there will be a short stretch of road where it's running into the road instead of before it gets to the ditch. Of course, Stone Road is also crowned, so eventually all the water will end up in ditches either on one side of the intersection or the other, in which case it'll be managed
So
from
there are
there.
existing culverts on Stone Road?
There is an existing culvert on Stone Road. I will say we haven't designed or finalized our design or provided any stormwater management yet, so that's to come. We're really here to sort of introduce this to you folks, get some initial feedback, and then hopefully our next step will be to come with all these details. But yeah, stormwater management is is a big one where we certainly know we need to provide more information on.
Thank you.
Yeah, because you've not only got the runoff going on to Stone Road, coming down both sides of the drive or the roadway, but you've also got some vernal pools fairly close to where you're cutting through.
That's right. And we've done what we could. We feel like we've minimized disturbance close to those vernal pools, or stayed as far away as we could reasonably. There is because we will be impacting within 250 feet of these vernal pools, we will need to go to DEP for permitting for impacts within those.
You haven't done that
those
yet?
areas. We've not done that yet.
And they're gonna require you to not disturb more than 25% of the canopy.
That's right.
Keep 75% of it wild.
That's right. That's the standard for a permit by rule. So I think you could propose something else, but
Sure.
it would be a more intensive
Yeah.
permitting process with them. Yeah.
You mentioned in your cover letter, you called this a sketch plan submission.
Yeah, we
This is
originally,
an-
we wanted to
yeah.
come before the board, again, with less than a complete application and get some initial feedback.
Understood.
We understand with site plan, there is no sketch plan.
There's no
technically.
formal sketch plan, but coming without the stormwater, for example, you set the stage for a continued
Yes.
initial review, and I don't see a problem with that.
And to answer the question about whether or not they should meet the subdivision standards.
Are
no.
required to,
Or, yeah, they're not required to. This is a site plan application.
Right. understood.
So we're not reviewing it as a subdivision, we're reviewing it as a site plan. Obviously, it's nice that you've met the standards, but
Right.
it's
So,
it's not required to meet the subdivision standards.
Well,
So I
and-
guess, if I may, I think what that means is a waiver wouldn't be required. If the board were to agree to that, the 3% for 25 feet before transitioning, technically a waiver wouldn't be required, but I think maybe some sort of waiver would still be required for the 2-to-1 slope, because that's a requirement in the zoning ordinance.
I'm guessing that in the zoning ordinance, and I'll have to look, that the planning board has some discretion
I think it does.
on that. Because per se, we don't have the ability to waive land use ordinance requirements.
Understood.
There are a
I
number
think
of them,
there's
and
some
I think this
language
is
that-
one of them that
there's-
allows discretion.
Yeah, there is some language, you're right.
where
It
it
may
makes
not be
sense.
technically a waiver, but.
Yep, okay. So we'll look at that.
And I'm assuming the hammerhead meets the current standards from the fire chief. I didn't look to measure it, but it looks like it does.
Yes.
And we got no negative comments from the fire chief in
We-
terms of the project, so.
You got a chance to look at it.
He didn't make it to our meeting, but I did get an email from him that he was relatively, comfortable with the
Oh, that's good.
process.
Are they also comfortable with the 10%, or is that even a consideration?
We did look at the temper, unfortunately, Public Works was not, in attendance there. The only thing, it meets our standards, so we're not concerned from an ordinance standpoint. We don't know what your thoughts are on trash pickup, but we think it's likely that Casella would not be willing to go down the street, given the grade. So just something to consider as, once the lots get broken up and people start building, what their garbage situation will look like. But from an ordinance standpoint, no concerns about
And
the grade.
Sorry, is Casella's, is the
The waste
the
management,
towns, the
private
towns,
management.
okay.
yes.
Okay, understood, thanks.
Contracted by the town.
Yeah.
And I know some people who have not had the ability for their trucks to come up or on a private way have contracted separately for a small service to do it, and others collect their trash at the end of the street.
Yeah, and again, that's not really a concern that, from a passing the plan standpoint, just a note that our team had when we were reviewing the project.
Well, I'll say again, I think one of the benefits, I don't think I'm kidding myself, one of the benefits of doing a site plan review is that you get a forum and you have some discussion and you can choose what to take and what not to take, but it's all good. It's all offered in the spirit of experience, I guess.
From staff, obviously, and you've mentioned the stormwater plan on your own, so we'll expect to see that coming through
Yeah, absolutely.
later. And then we did hear from you about the deeds situation and the conveyance of the lots. So we're waiting to hear from the attorney with answers to your question, and we'll keep you posted as we hear answers on our own.
Yeah, so for the board's benefit, we had a question, Howard had a question, where, again, the owner here and the applicant is Snapdragon Properties LLC, and which is a corporation, obviously. Can a corporation gift to children if the sole owners of the corporation are the parents? It's a legal
There must be a way
question.
to,
Yeah. So we're working
Yes,
working
so
through that question with the
The
town
question's
attorney.
gone to the attorney. We enjoyed getting it. It was an interesting question, so it's always a good time.
Something different.
Can I bring one more thing up?
yeah, please.
And thank you for the memo. The memo was definitely helpful. There is a requirement to identify existing trees that are at least 8 inches in diameter, measured 4.5 feet above grade, which has not been done. And, I think we would respectfully request a waiver for that, and the reason is this is a completely forested site. There are a lot of environmental constraints related to the vernal pools and the wetlands, and I think there's very little opportunity to zigzag the road or move the road in order to save an 8-inch tree. So I just wonder what would given that, what would the benefit of that be? Of that requirement, what would the benefit be? But again, I'll leave that to the board.
And that would be a survey just on the roadway itself, right?
On the area to be cleared is what we'd be.
Cleared for
interested
the
in.
roadway to be constructed.
I'll add, when you're, sometimes if you're master planning, a big project, it's nice to see where all the trees are, and you can try to preserve this and preserve that. But in this case, like I mentioned, unfortunately, there's not a lot of wiggle room because we're doing everything we can to stay away from the vernal pools and minimize wetland impacts and those sort of things, so.
Right. I'm having a hard time seeing that as a compelling argument. Says it doesn't matter what we find, we're going to ignore it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right, I mean, I think it's similar to very often a high-intensity soil survey is required for projects, but where you have public sewer, that requirement's almost always waived, because
Yes.
what's it gonna tell us? That, or how is it gonna inform the design? So I think that's how I see it. I see it in a similar light to that. It's just an additional cost at this point to the applicant.
So when would that argument not be used by an applicant, Mike?
Well, like the situation I just talked about.
We think it's expensive. We don't think there's any other way to do this. It doesn't matter how big those trees are, we're going there.
Right,
And
well,
I know
you
don't need to know how big they are. That's what I'm hearing.
I think I just explained, I think if you have a larger development and you can identify areas of large trees, we do this all the time with, you lay out your existing conditions and what are your constraints and what are your opportunities. And very often, if you've got some large trees that you want to preserve, you design around them. In this case, I'm just saying there's little opportunity to
You're saying it's an
design.
18-acre site, and this is the only place you can put a road?
I'm saying, given,
That's what I'm hearing,
fair enough.
you know?
I think you've heard,
You're my
you've heard my request, I guess, and
And
do it the way you may.
picture us in the business of dealing with multiple applicants here on different projects. And how many trees, you know?
Sorry?
I just think the tree survey is one of the requirements, and I'm having trouble.
Would it be a tree survey of the shared road but not the shared drive? Because it's a driveway? So up to the hammerhead?
Why would you say that, Mike?
Yeah, I tried. The road versus driveway.
Maybe we can pull up the requirement, or we can do that after the fact, agree to go do a little more thinking about this.
And then also, if you take the right of way, you know, what percentage of the lot is that? So, you know, if we add, you know, we've got 18.5 acres, is it 2 acres, is it, you know, is it a significant percentage of the whole area where the road's going or not, just so we have a relative.
It's 1,000-foot by 50-foot.
Yeah,
swath.
yeah,
Well, yeah,
whatever
do the
that
math.
works out to. Yeah, it's fairly simple math.
Yeah.
But be able to say, okay, it's 10%, 12%, 15%, 2%, whatever it is, just to get a feel for the impact.
I just know if Nina was sitting here, she'd be pulling her hair out at the thought that the oldest tree in Kennebunkport is sitting on that lot somewhere. And we're gonna get an okay to go cut it down without even blinking an eye. No, I don't know that it is or isn't there,
And I'm not
but
sure there's any standard around large trees, other than locating them. So even if we
so
locate
you're
them,
you're making an argument to change the ordinance, I understand that.
I'm not making an argument to change the ordinance, I'm making a request to waive a submission requirement.
Let's take a look at it offline.
Can I ask how that would work offline?
We're gonna end up continuing this initial review.
Yep.
We'll have an answer by the next meeting.
Gotcha.
I will, anyway.
And we'll look at, the planning board will look at the requirement.
The letter of the ordinance, what is it we're looking to waive? Do we even have discretion to waive it, and to what degree?
Understood.
That's what has me concerned. We're not dealing with the subdivision regs, where we have quite a bit more.
So, Nadia,
Yes.
when they go to develop these lots in 5 years, whatever it is, would there be a requirement for the tree survey before clearing to place the buildings?
No. So our land use ordinance doesn't regulate trees outside of the shoreline zone. The vernal pool, 250-foot setback would be an impact. As it stands right now for Lot 4, actually, the vernal pool setback isn't affecting it, but that's neither here nor there. The answer is no. We, in our land use ordinance, don't regulate tree cutting outside of the shoreline zone. So I think as
Well, wait a minute then.
the planning board, obviously, you guys can decide whether you want to waive the requirement or not. You do have the discretion to waive it, since it's a submission requirement, not a land use ordinance.
I'm
Not
sorry.
an article in the land use ordinance.
What is the requirement? Maybe this is getting embarrassing.
So
What exactly is the requirement we're being asked to waive?
So the applicant is requesting a waiver for, sorry, let me find the,
Is it in 240?
yep, so it's,
So it's in the land use ordinance?
it's in the planning board site plan application submission requirements.
Okay.
So it's not, so yes, technically it's in chapter 240, but it is within the board's power to waive it as a requirement. You'll see in your memo, it's number 7. I believe. Yes, existing trees, all existing physical features on the site and within 200 feet thereof, including streams, watercourses, existing woodlands, existing trees at least 8 inches in diameter as measured 4.5 feet above grade.
Thank you.
Can you help us understand how much wiggle room you do have? I mean, trying to clear these vernal pools?
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're trying to maximize sort of the buffer to the vernal pool itself. And so there are 2 vernal pools.
Particularly, I guess, the one in lot 2, or lot 1 rather.
You can go right along, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the one I was most concerned with.
And so with the constraints on the road geometry, so like, you know, you can't have a radius that's too tight. You can't have reverse curves. So what we've done is we've pulled it as far away from that vernal pool as we think we can.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the road is where it is in that location. And
You're saying otherwise it would be further south.
exactly.
Yeah.
Are there in fact guidelines?
So again, in the
In
subdivision
the
ordinance,
subdivision reg.
in the subdivision regs, there are maximum centerline radiuses. So
I'm thinking about with respect to the vernal pools and clearances of that.
there is, in order to meet sort of the criteria in order to qualify for a permit by rule, you need to, there can be no impact within 100 feet of the vernal pool itself, and then you need to minimize impact within 250 feet of the vernal pool.
Which is most of the roadway.
So we can certainly, Galen and I can take some time over the next couple of weeks and prepare some guidance for you guys if you are feeling torn about this requirement, and can come back to you with some answers from staff if you'd like. It sounds like we'll be continuing the review, so there certainly is opportunity for some more
You're
information.
talking about the tree still?
Yes.
About the-
And the vernal pool impact, we can kind of cover both.
Yeah, I don't believe vernal pools are regulated by the local ordinance, but of course they are by DEP.
DEP is
Yes.
gonna be to get the permit you're gonna
Exactly.
have to address.
Right.
And make them happy.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think in the land use ordinance, it does capture the state requirement
Yes.
to not disturb more than 25% of the, basically the wild character around the vernal pool. You make a point, Mike, that with an application to Maine DEP and some extra work, that maybe more could be done, but I know we are obliged to be concerned about the vernal pool in the area around it, pools are in the area around it. So, can we go down through the board? Maybe Peter, starting with you, do you have questions that you want to bring forward?
No, I think this has been very helpful conversation. And
Okay.
I have no further questions.
Michael, how about you?
Yeah, I think we've discussed the ones had also caught the tree, the stormwater.
Yeah,
And those are gonna be addressed. Those were the two big ones I had, and that the fire chief was good. I didn't catch the slope, so that was good, that was discussed. So I'm good for today.
Joseph?
Yeah, I want to look at the most recent tree ordinance. The one I looked at is 2010. Is there a more recent ordinance?
For a tree ordinance?
Yeah, the tree ordinance, that's what we've been talking about here, right? That's the quote, tree ordinance.
You may be thinking about tag trees. I don't believe,
I'd like to see the actual ordinance, if there is one, because if there isn't an ordinance, then
we
So I
don't
think
have a tree
there's two things we need to look at. If there is something that the Shade Tree Committee would refer us to, that would be interesting, but I think that we need to go look exactly what's written in 240 about,
Yeah.
that would answer Mike's question, which is, well, why are you asking for the submission requirement if in 240 there's no requirements then that follow from that? I think that's a fair question.
I agree.
I don't have the answer to it.
But we've been talking about tree ordinance for like 20 minutes.
We've been talking about trees.
Trees, and I would just like to see any ordinance or any documentation or code or, because I've looked in 240 and I'm, you know, shoreland trees I've seen,
Our-
public trees, catalog trees, tag trees, maintenance
outside of the
trees.
tagged tree or the shoreland zone, we basically are not in the business of regulating tree.
What we're talking
activity.
about here is there's a requirement for the applicant to identify large trees.
So,
That's
a
what that's all
hypothetical,
we're talking about.
And in fairness, I think one of the benefits we provide as a planning board is to offer the public a chance to look closely at projects. One of the things people are genuinely concerned about is what are you taking down? These trees have been there since before we were.
so
What are you
to
taking down? Have you given it enough thought?
answer, I think,
It's
Joe's
the only reason I.
question, that requirement is kind of there to give the planning board an opportunity. If Michael comes back and says, you know, there's a 42-inch diameter tree, the planning board can put a condition in that says you have to avoid this massive tree. But
If
it's-
you point me to an ordinance or a statute that says that, then I agree with you, but it may be just looked at it quickly, but I can't find that, where it says.
You're correct.
If you find a 42-inch tree that's been there since Pocahontas planted it, that you can't push it down on your driveway on private property if it's not in the shoreline zone. I can't find anything in the statute that says that. And that's what, whether you need to do a tree survey to identify whether there's a 42-inch tree that you have the right to unequivocally knock down, that may be a requirement, but I just would like to see what the actual statute says about.
So you're asking
And
Nadia for
and
help?
that's the
Yes, I'm
answer, it
asking
does,
them.
nothing. Unless you have a tagged tree or you're in the shoreland zone.
Right.
And are you aware, are there any tagged trees on the property?
No.
I'm not aware.
Then, as
That would be
as
very
far as
unusual.
if they were not coming before the planning board, we would not be able to say anything to them about cutting
Clearing.
their trees.
Okay. Anything else, Joe?
No?
I had a few other things. I'd like to go through the planning memo and some of the items that are marked as being outstanding and just make sure we're all on the same page on those. But before that, I wanted to ask about, what's it called? Net buildable area or
Net residential. And
net
but-
residential area? So we're trying to look forward here. We're saying, no, this isn't subject to subdivision review, but we're gonna go authorize a road and an extension to that road as a driveway to be put in with the thought that it's gonna serve 4 lots. So those lots should be, to the first order, at least buildable lots. I don't think we're gonna go through and say, has septic been
That's
or
correct. So
wells or anything like that. That's all for the future.
So that, and that will be handled administratively. If it's a family subdivision,
Right.
we won't split the lot if it doesn't meet
But
our
to the,
lot standards.
that's right. But you don't want to do this big investment if we think it's likely that it's not going to. It's just,
I mean, it's not really something that, the applicant is making their own.
they're making an informed
gander,
decision of their own.
basically. Yes.
That's
So-
all. And so we're giving it a good review with that thought. So when I look at the size of these lots, I want to ask the question, do we think they're likely to have the net residential area? And in particular, I looked at Lot 4 here that's got 1.58 acres, and a bunch of it has got the vernal pool in it, and a bunch of it's got a road through it, I think.
I
Well,
would
maybe
note
it
that
doesn't.
per state, per the rules of the state right now, that vernal pool will mean nothing once the lot lines are put in. As of how the law stands right now, the vernal pool could be on the 1 foot away from the property line, and that setback does not affect the next property over.
So where is Lot 4? Maybe let me start with a simple.
I would caution the planning board diving too deep into these lots. These are preliminary, we're not creating lots here. These are
These are
kind
no-
of sketches that
notional.
the family is kicking around. to-
Notional.
Sure.
But it's driving where you're putting the road,
Mhm.
for example, and where we're cutting trees. So you're sensitive to the thought that Lot 4 in the limit has got to meet this,
We're aware.
okay. So I won't belabor it then. There was a question that the code office asked, and I'll ask it this way. What is the story with this area to be conveyed, 88,000?
Yeah, that was my mistake. So that
No worries?
is a lot that was created back in 2022 and sold prior to Snapdragon purchasing the remaining 18 acres.
It's not part of this picture at all.
It's,
Too easy.
it's not.
Okay,
It's not on this property
all right.
anymore.
So that boundary line is in fact the boundary line of the proposed.
Correct, and the plan, the colored plan I have here corrects that. I know
Okay,
you
that's
don't have
great.
this, but the next plan you receive will.
I'm not
will get
griping, I just, yeah. Similarly, that wedge that's on the rightmost side of this drawing as I'm looking at it. If I look at the code, the decoder ring for the legend here, it says the dark line is the project site boundary, and the lighter line, which I think is the one that's almost vertical, is the abutting property line. So who owns that?
Yeah, so
There.
that's part of the adjacent lot is a big piece of property. It goes out to Goose Rocks Road. And it's part of that. So that lot, that line showed up on a survey. It was, I believe it was probably described in some deed, but it's not on this project site.
Okay, so
And I can clarify that a little bit.
Lo-
I know,
map 25, block 5, lot 4B ends on the diagonal line then. No.
They shaded.
Move to the left a little bit. That shaded area is the lot we're talking about.
what's shaded is the property that's owned by Snapdragon. Anything that's not shaded is outside of
Is out of
the
this
subject
picture.
parcel.
Okay, I just got confused by the legend. Right, talked about the deeds.
I have a question about deeds. Clearly, we're here for approval for
build a
the
road.
applicant to build a road.
On one lot.
And, right, and those deeds they'll come after that, right? So, and I understand what the what staff and the town attorney is getting at. So and I think what we would propose is to maybe provide that language, but I don't think there are gonna be no deeds yet when.
So it's interesting
when
you
this-
say that. We had a big harangue about this on a very similar project a couple of months ago.
Pretty
A
recently.
few months ago. And I was coming from right where you were on this. I said, wait a minute, no, this is just one lot and we're putting in a road on it. What's all this business about lots and deeds? And I think what it comes down to is that this is clearly a request for what would be a subdivision, except that it's exempted by virtue of it's going to be deeded. And because of that, we had the attorney go look at it, and she said, no, you don't wanna acknowledge that you will review it in that manner unless you have these deeds in hand. So that's the way it came down last time. You can
Yeah.
push on that again, but that's what happened.
Basically, it's our
Be
town
careful
attorney's
whose word you're
suggestion
taking for
for,
this, right? I'm not the lawyer, but that's how I heard it.
it was our town attorney's suggestion for how to, basically keep in the record proof that this project is not skirting subdivision
Sure.
regulations.
And I can talk with the applicant about whether or not deeds can be created by the time, where we get to a vote on this. So, okay, let us kick that around a little bit. But we're happy to,
It's
put something on the plan, provide deed language, and if we can provide deeds, I think we will. But, yeah, let us think on that a
nobody
little
that,
bit.
neither the town nor the planning board, I'm sure your applicants want to be put in the situation where later on somebody says, oh, wait a minute, I'm not gonna be able to give these to my kids,
Right.
and, that road doesn't cut it anymore.
Right.
For one reason or another, because we didn't review it to the standard. You can't make it a subdivision without some rework or whatever. I know that concern was lurking,
Okay, understood.
okay?
And we'll, and like I said, referring to the deeds and gifting again, we have a question out to the attorney
already
currently
engaged.
about the corporation situation.
Great,
So
thanks.
we'll keep you posted.
Before I forget, it's not on my list, let me just clarify again. You're saying that where this new structure is going to serve 4 lots, it's big enough to satisfy the subdivision regs for serving 4 single-family homes, and the land use ordinance for that?
Yes, it's.
And at a point, it only serves 2, and from that point on, it's slightly reduced in width, appropriately,
Correct.
okay. And the fire chief doesn't have any problem with the fact that his turnaround is back here?
Well, because the next piece is a driveway, so it's not part of the,
Down here?
yes.
Okay, I didn't,
So it may be attached to the road, but we're treating it in this example as a private driveway.
How long is the driveway?
We don't have any regulation on the length of a
I
driveway.
was just wondering.
I just want the fire chief
400
to not be
feet.
surprised that
400
he,
feet.
That's what it's shown.
Yeah.
Of course, we don't know exactly where the houses are. It will split.
no, it's notional right now, but
Like I said, the fire chief did not
you think
voice any
he's,
concerns, so I think we should be.
okay,
good on that.
good stuff. So 4 lots total, no common area, nothing else.
Correct.
It's going, that's how you envision this at this point. Staff had a concern about parking for the construction vehicles in doing this road. Do you have any such concerns? Even though it's kind of steep at the beginning,
Yeah, we can think about that a little bit. I don't think it's a overly,
well, it's just that you don't have to go too far before you're inside that 250-foot area. So
right. Yep.
something of,
Let me
obviously,
think about that a
not a
little bit.
requirement per se, but I thought it was a very thoughtful comment.
Agreed.
Stormwater report, yeah. No landscaping plan, I don't have a problem with that.
Shouldn't be a lot
Anyone
of
else?
There's
landscaping.
no houses yet.
No.
So would the board waive that submission requirement?
Yes,
For the roadway.
for this
Yeah.
site application
Yeah,
for the
this-
road, yeah. Similarly, no proposed lighting, and we would, I think, go along with that
Yeah.
submission requirement. It says no signs being proposed. Just out of curiosity, will there be a stop sign at the bottom of this? or-
Yeah, there'll be a stop sign
Traffic signs are
in
exempted
a street sign.
from the ordinance requirements.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So street signs, stop
Never knew
signs,
that.
anything that would be kind of a legal requirement to have.
It's gonna get taken care of outside of this process.
Well, we wouldn't take care of it either. It's exempted from our sign standards. So if someone puts up a street sign, they don't need to get, like, they don't need to get the same type of approval that they would for a commercial business sign.
They're not required to put up a stop sign? Is that what I'm hearing?
If they put up a stop sign, traffic signs are not included in the ordinance that regulates signage in Kennebunkport.
Understood.
If, whether or not,
You
don't know.
You don't know
if
how
they're
it's
required
regulated.
or not to put up a stop sign.
I think we would propose a stop sign
Right.
and
And I'm sure
and a
there's
street sign.
I'm sure there's an ordinance somewhere that tells you that it's gotta have 8 sides, and it's gotta be colored red a certain way, and it's gotta be a certain distance off the ground, and it's probably papered 6 ways to Sunday, but I'm just not sure who's, I think Public Works
It's not,
must be
it's
all
not
over that.
ours. It's probably, I would assume it's a state requirement, or that there's some broader
No, it's gotta be
rule
within,
for-
it's gotta be within the city, because we've got stuff that's not on state roads that has stop signs.
I would have to look into the
Yeah,
stop sign.
just curious.
requirements.
I would assume a street sign is fine because the fire department's gonna require it.
Yes.
Actually, it's 240./6.12, signs and billboards
Is it,
code.
yep.
So you're right.
Okay. Parking, landscaping, lighting, signs. We don't need to know the proposed use of all floor areas either. You'd be good with that. Mike, you gonna do any blasting? Do you know?
We suspect there will be blasting. In fact, I can almost
Pretty
guarantee.
safe to
Yeah,
bet
I
on
was gonna
that.
say, you're gonna make that uphill ground without blasting. Good
All
luck.
right.
A lot of grinding then.
That's all I have. I appreciate your patience. If there's no other questions, I would make a motion that we continue the initial review.
And a second?
All those in favor?
Thanks, folks. Very helpful.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Michael.
Yeah, thanks,
We
Mike.
appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it. Right, and we took the action to think more about that tree business.
Right.
And just a note on, and there was some, I think, confusion about the planning board adding conditions. This is your conditions attached to site plan review section of the ordinance. Says that the planning board can include conditions for type of vegetation, specified sewage disposal and water supply facilities, landscaping and planting screens, period of operation, operational controls, professional inspection and maintenance, sureties, deed restrictions, restrictive covenants, types of construction, or any other reasonable conditions necessary to fulfill the purpose of this chapter. So you are allowed to add conditions into things that aren't necessarily regulated strictly by our land use ordinance.
Right, I just think we need to, in general,
And-
have a damn good reason for levying conditions.
And like I
That's
said,
all.
Galen and I will prepare some guidance for you guys over the next couple of weeks, and we'll come back we'll
Yeah,
give
I
it
think-
to you in time.
I think it'll be a good exercise. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Helps us maintain consistency, which is good.
Which
Yeah,
is hard
absolutely.
and important.
Yeah, but once it's documented, we're there. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Good luck with the project. Looks like an interesting one.
Can I just ask a question? So I live at 71 Stone Road.
Please come to the microphone.
I'm sorry.
If it's a question about the application, we will have a public hearing.
No, this is about the groundwater issue. There's only one culvert that goes under that road. And
Yeah.
if any of you have lived here long enough, Stone Road used to come through what's now my little front field. So the culvert that was there collapsed, it was a mess, and it would flood that little front field, which I don't care. But it also would take out all the gravel along the edge of the road.
Sure.
So, I mean, the way it is now, there's a big dip, for the mailman or anybody who wants to pull it through. But the thing is, I ended up pulling out that culvert and the rocks that were blocking everything. So the water only really comes from my property down through that culvert. So if you guys wanna look at that,
So you,
I don't care, I can live with it. but
so I think the way this is, we don't want to try to get into the business. We wouldn't be any good at it anyway, of trying to engineer the solutions for these things. But I do think that with this amount of surface being added and the history that you're talking about, my sense is that Teradyne's gonna come back with a proposed stormwater management approach. And look at that when it comes, and then come to the public meeting and,
Oh, I'm
you know,
only
add-
bringing it up as a matter of interest.
no, I understand, and we're taking it in that sense. We're not taking this in the formal,
I mean,
course of events
It
here.
almost has nothing to do with what Howard wants to do. I mean, other than the fact that stormwater comes down off my property, washes
Yeah.
out the edge of the road. I've tried to remedy that, but it's not.
Yeah, and this is gonna be more, so,
This is gonna add a lot more water possibly.
Oh, yeah.
So, no, it's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
not a problem.
Excellent, can we see what he had on the website, on the town website?
Yes.
Plans?
It's available on the website. We don't, the shaded in one, we don't have yet. I expect he'll send it to us soon,
Okay.
probably later this week.
Planning office?
You'll have to watch it on television like
So
us. now.
you're welcome to come into the town office and view it physically, or you can view it on the town website under the planning board page.
Oh, okay.
All the active applications are there,
Okay.
and everything that's been submitted that we review is there for the public to look at.
Alright.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. Have a great night.
Take care. You as well.
Feeling lonely?
Just you, Mr. Peterson?
Public hearing.
So let me announce this agenda item. Just give me a second. Second item agenda is number 250301 for 6 Edgewood Avenue. Eric Peterson's the agent. And this is, we're scheduled for a public hearing this evening.
Lots of
Eric, could you
interest,
just
apparently.
remind us what we're up to here?
Yes,
People on Zoom.
Good question.
There are people on Zoom.
there are,
We
okay.
we do
great.
have some people on Zoom.
Good. So I'm Eric Peterson from Peterson Design Group in Kennebunk, representing the Flanagans tonight. As I've explained in the past, this is an existing house on a very small lot on a side street at Goose Rocks. And we are seeking to remove the existing house and construct a new house with a no larger footprint in a less non-conforming location on the lot. Part of the house now actually is off the property, so we are seeking to put this in a more central location. And at the same time, the new house will become FEMA flood compliant, which it is not now. So we intend to raise the finished floor to be more than 2 feet above the BFE in that spot. And we are proposing to use some of our 30% expansion potential, mostly in volume, not so much area. There's really not any area to get. So we have a 5% footprint expansion, which is capturing what was a deck as living space. And then we are proposing a 29% volume expansion, mostly to create like some attic space to put our mechanicals in, because they can't be in the crawl space now. You gotta keep them out of the flood zone. So we've addressed, I think, the issue of parking. We're seeking to take what was a one-car parking space and reconfigure it in a combination of a conventional driveway for one space and then a strip, ribbon driveway, they call it, for the other parking space, in order to get our mandated 2 cars off-street parking using the same amount of lot coverage that we had. So we're seeking to relocate the propane tank and the generator that exist on the property now and landscape around them. We've asked for a waiver for signage. We don't anticipate anything other than like house numbers, so there won't be any sort of signage program for that lot. We're under the height restriction. I'm trying to think of anything else that's pertinent to this project. Land use wise, we're removing a fence. There's just an existing open split rail fence on this property that bisected the front yard, so we want to remove that. It was kind of falling apart. Other than that, I think we've tried to do things to make it as conforming as possible, given the tiny size of the lot. So, does anyone have any
Can I ask anyone on the board have a question or comment they want to make?
I do not.
No changes really since what we talked about last time?
I don't have any changes. I just have a little additional color based on some things that Nadia asked for. We did go to the sewer department and got that tie card that was asked for. I think that's been already disseminated to all the planning board members a couple weeks ago or last week. We paid an impact fee for adding an additional bedroom. It occurred to me that that was only a 2-bedroom house before, and now it wants to be a 3-bedroom house, so we paid the additional impact fee that allows us to then have a 3-bedroom house on the town sewer system.
Interesting, okay.
That's something sort of new in the last couple of years. The sewer department is now charging.
Makes sense.
They're charging you an additional impact fee for
Sure.
adding a bedroom.
Same as if you have your septic sized for a 2-bedroom
I
or
guess.
3-bedroom.
Yeah. Mhm.
I can understand it.
Let's see. Oh, that's a question. Does the board want that tie card information for every project going forward that's served by sewer, or is that, because that's new to me. That's the first time I've ever heard about it. Is that like a new thing to put on the list of things to include?
For a new dwelling, yes, if, like, for any new construction.
So like a renovation doesn't fall into that?
I would say unless, I mean, it probably wouldn't go to planning board if it was just a
Well, I have one
regular-
coming up. That's why I ask. I just submitted one that you'll see pretty soon.
for a regular renovation.
It's a renovation and addition to a house at Goose Rocks that's on town sewer now.
Can I comment that I've allowed myself to think this made sense to request because given that it's being relocated, you could possibly be changing where the tie-in was.
True.
If you weren't doing that, would this question have even come up?
I'll check with Galen to see about that, but my instinct is that if the foundation and where it's actually tying in isn't changing, that we wouldn't necessarily need that approval, but like I said, I'll check in with Galen.
We're reading between the lines here.
Will be good to know
Eric,
for the.
good question.
That's why I
for the
asked that.
future.
Just, it's
No,
new
it's
to
a
me.
good question.
So the one thing for that information is to try to figure out where the service enters the property, so that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and this is,
So
it's
you
kind
all
of
know,
a
and the builder
broader.
knows.
Yeah, so we're working on this in our office, is streamlining the process, so this is kind of part of a broader initiative in the,
I'm just the first fly in the web, is that the?
not the first one, but the first one in the planning board
First one
web.
caught.
Yes.
That's
Okay, fair.
All the others escaped.
But I would say if it's gonna be an addition includes a bedroom,
Yeah, if you're
Then you
gonna be
might-
adding a bedroom, then
Want
we
to do
would,
that.
For sure, that's been in the last couple of years that the sewer department has required that additional, I call it an impact fee. It's a
Yeah.
sliver of an impact
Yeah.
fee based on how many.
it's like
bedrooms you have.
$180 or something.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see, I have 2 copies of the plans rolled, not folded, with
One,
a signature block.
I'd
So
like
we
to
wanna-
clarify, that's not our office being crazy. The Registry of Deeds won't take it if it's folded.
I just laughed when I
So-
was at the printer, I'm like, do not fold those or I will
Yes.
be in trouble, so.
I
So-
think
so-
it makes us sound a little bit crazy, but it is
before
because of
we,
the registry.
before we get into summarizing,
Yeah.
I think we really owe it to ourselves to hold a public hearing
Fair.
at this point, so unless
Oh.
there's,
Oh, can I just add 2 more things?
Oh,
that
of
just-
course.
Just to fill in the last bits.
sure.
We did add the waiver that we asked for about signage to the plan, site plan. And since we met last, our permit by rule has been approved, so that is in hand through DEP.
Excellent.
Peter, when you were going through the draft of a findings of fact, you had a question about the deed, the way it was,
Yeah, I
The
guess
ownership versus the applicant?
Application came in with the Matthew Peter Flanagan Living Trust as the applicant. And yet recorded with the Registry of Deeds, York County, there are 2 trusts. There's his trust and there's his wife's trust, the Margaret Mehegan Flanagan Living Trust, each of which owns 50% of the.
Oh, I didn't know that nuance. We take the information off the tax card initially.
This was only done in December, early December of 2024. In fact, when they bought the property, which I believe was in August.
Yep.
It was in their names individually, together.
That makes sense now because Maggie Flanagan said to me after this was submitted, how come my name is not on there? And I said, well, because the town, the legal record of owner at the town, where the source of our information basically shows the Matthew Peter Flanagan Trust, but didn't mention her. So that's what, without telling me that, I guess that's what she's referring to, is
Yes.
that maybe that's been
well,
updated. so.
in the application package, the way we split the baby here is, we said, well, look at the applicant listed on the application form is the Matthew.
Right, so the deed, the
deed-
Registry of Deeds is fresher information than the town has, basically.
Well, but that deed is in your application as well. That's where we got it from.
Oh, I see.
We've covered it both ways.
So we,
All right, so
and then we
how would you-
alluded to both. We said you showed ownership by virtue of referencing this deed.
Yeah,
Which is.
Since it's the same 2 individuals, it
yep.
was hard to object to that.
They're
It just was
connected.
confusing.
So would the findings of fact maybe reference the 2 trusts then?
Yes, it will.
Okay,
It does.
that
Yeah.
seems like it covers all the bases, right?
I thought you did a good job, yeah,
Okay, good catch.
if we get to that.
I have to admit, I don't read every deed, so,
May I open the public hearing?
yes, sir.
Okay, I'd like to do that. Is there anyone, there's no one here in the physical audience here at the court, at the firehouse? Somebody in the Zoom land with a raised hand?
We have 3 attendees, but no hands are raised yet. Oh, now we have a raised hand, and it went away. Okay, Kathleen Borche. Kathleen, you can speak if you unmute.
Yes, thank you. The last name is Borse.
Sorry.
Spell it, please.
And V as in victory, O-R-C-E.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Our family owns property at 10 Bellevue, which is 2 houses down from this location.
Yep.
And among the things that we're interested in is hours of construction, sizes of equipment, level of noise, and general disruption to the local community.
I'd like,
The applicant can project that out. And I don't know when they would anticipate commencing construction, but, we are very interested in preserving the enjoyment of the locale for the summer and not having a high level of noise. And Bellevue Ave is a J-shaped street. It's a dirt road.
Right?
And it's very small. And I can just envision large demolition equipment, excavation equipment, whatever, pretty much blocking our view, obstructing part of our access. And I'd just like to hear what the applicant can tell us about, scheduling and mitigation of some of these impacts.
Okay, we'll let Mr. Peterson speak to that, please.
Sure, thank you.
Very much.
I think I can assuage your fears in that the Flanagan's plan at this time is to use the house themselves for this summer and then start construction after Labor Day and through the winter and have it be ready for next summer, for summer of '26.
That is very reassuring. Thank you very much.
They're going to be good neighbors. They're people with long time Goose Rock's history. So they're very much aware of the fact that they've got a very small lot on a, bounded by two roads, one of which is a dirt lane, and it's tight. So they don't want to lose a summer either. So their intent at this moment is to enjoy it themselves this summer and then do the typical Goose Rock's construction window of Labor Day to Memorial Day and then be done so they can use it for the summer of '26.
You made some mention at the last meeting about standard operating practice at sites similar to this that you've been associated with in Goose Rocks vis-a-vis where people park their cars and during the day and where you're limiting vehicles being left on right-of-ways. And could you
Sure.
repeat that for this audience?
Yep. I mean, it comes up all the time at Goose Rocks. Obviously, it's tight quarters. So our construction drawings that are used as part of the legal document that a building contractor signs with the owner have specifications on them that include language that says that no vehicles associated with construction can be parked in the town right away at any time, in any town, because Moody Beach, same problem, no place to park, a lot of beach communities, there's no parking. So it's really the burden is on the builder to figure out how to use the space that's on the lot or have his people carpool. Yep.
Thank you. Are there any other hands raised?
Yes, first I'll ask Kathleen, do you have anything to add?
No, thank you very much. I'm much reassured. And we also have relatives who are at number 5 Edgewood, so I'll pass along this information that I've gathered. And thank you very much. I'm sure we knew the former resident, and we're good neighbors there, and I'm looking forward to more good neighbors. Thank you.
You'll be in luck.
Yep.
Ellen Emmons also has a hand raised. Ellen, you may speak. You have to unmute yourself, though. Ellen, I cannot unmute you. You must unmute yourself. It appears you're unmuted, but we don't hear you.
Is there a phone number, David?
No. Oh, there is. I'd have to look it up.
Okay.
Hold on a moment.
I have it. It's this
Go ahead.
929.
Yep.
If Ellen, if it'd be simpler to join by phone, you can join at 929-205-6099. This is also on the agenda and on the website.
Say one more time, please.
929-205-6099.
Do we have the phone here?
Where does that ring?
I believe,
It calls into Zoom.
On your laptop?
yeah, they
It's
will.
just
get
another
that.
way of joining the Zoom meeting.
Never done that.
Learning all sorts today.
We don't enable chat, I take it.
We do not.
Okay. Understood.
Call?
No.
You should, took her hand up.
Why don't we give it another minute?
Al, if you wish to speak, please call the phone number that Nadia mentioned.
Please say one more time.
It's 929-205-6099.
That's too bad.
Nadia, do they have to enter the webinar ID numbers once they dial in?
I've never dialed in, so I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't dialed in before, but I believe there's a verbal prompt to enter. So we can read off that number.
So the ID numbers that would have to be entered are 813-0533-1928.
All of that information is also anywhere you can find the Zoom link. We'll have the number and the webinar ID. So should be relatively easy to find.
Is there anyone else with a hand up?
Kathleen has raised her hand again.
Kathy?
Now it's down again. Now it's up again. All right. Kathleen, you can speak.
I was just going to say for Ms. Emmons' information, I'm juggling Zoom meetings tonight, and they often have the meeting ID as you published on the screen, but then there's a separate password code or passcode, and that I think is what would give her access.
I now have a Lauren Emmons, so that might be Ellen. I will allow her to speak. She has her hand up. Lauren Emmons, you can speak.
Hi.
We hear you.
Yes, sorry about that. It is actually Ellen Emmons. We were having some computer problems here. Sorry about that. I apologize. We own the
Excuse me,
property
is it-
at 2 Bellevue
Can
Avenue.
you, Ellen, could you just confirm, is it Ellen, E-L-L-E-N?
Yes, it is.
Evans,
Emmons, E-M-M-O-N-S.
E-M-O-N-S, thank you.
We're at 2 Bellevue, across from this property. Our major concern is we know that the house itself will be raised up. How much of the lot land will be raised up? We've had a tremendous amount of runoff from water. We're the lowest point of the beach in that area. So we end up get our backyard floods from any kind of runoff from either Kings Highway, from Edgewood. It comes right through the houses on Edgewood into our property. So that is primarily our concern, is the elevation of the property itself being raised.
No.
That was Mr. Peterson speaking.
Okay.
No
All right.
change, you're saying no change in
No,
elevation?
not at all.
And it won't be sloped up or anything. I know like a house back on Wildwood, that got raised up and it slopes tremendously onto both neighbors and into the street. So there's not gonna be any elevation raise at all in the center of the property.
No.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Nope, thank you.
Thanks for persevering, getting through. Are there any other people waiting to speak, Dave?
No other hands raised.
All right. With that, I'd like to close the public hearing. Any other questions or comments?
No.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Public here.
Yes. Close the public hearing. is there a motion?
Second.
I was looking for a motion for this application.
I'll make a motion to approve the application.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Yes,
Thank you.
4-0. Thank you.
Thanks.
You make it easy with the right answers, you know? You've given it a lot of thought. No, you put a lot of thought into it.
It's a fact, I mean, it's bad, you know, like
Yeah,
on Broadway and Clark Road and Dorrance, it's just,
A little bit of elevation.
even when there's no construction, it's difficult.
it's a puddle there right
Yeah.
now, I guarantee that.
Yeah.
Just there's nowhere for that water to go.
Yep.
Can I ask you a question? Is it an appropriate time to ask you a question for some advice on a planning board application that I just filed?
No.
Just advice, just guidance or an opinion on something?
What's the question?
So, it's the King property on New Bedford Road. There are 4,
It's like on the left hand,
yeah, if you go out, if you go from the 4-way at Kings Highway, Gregory's, and New Bedford. And
Going back up to Route 9.
yep, cross over the creek,
Yep.
and on the left-hand side,
It's like a little compound.
on the left, there's a situation with 4 houses down in there the King family owns, and so we're working on, we did the first house on the right probably 12 years ago, and now we're working on another house for that family that's deeper in that property. They own 2 parcels, lot 4 and 4B, that are adjacent to each other, a main house and a cottage on the other parcel. The site plan that we're proposing has the parking for both the main house and the cottage on the main house's lot. And we realize that probably generates the need for some sort of deed language that would describe like an easement for the parking on that lot. And I guess the owner has reached out to his attorney, who's local, and said that we need to do this, and the attorney and my client suggested maybe I ought to poll the board here and see, how would you want that to read? Like, how would you want that to be born?
Well, again, you're not asking legal wizards here at all.
Joe?
But that's right, this isn't, you don't want to get into that here,
No.
even if you
No.
had the wherewithal.
But how would you want to
But-
see
but-
that, I guess?
But I think we have seen that, the only one I can think of where we have seen this is in the Nonantum. Where the Nonantum, some of the parking is on one lot on one side of the street and a separate lot on the other side of the street. I know we've seen this before.
We met with Galen last week
Yeah,
and went over all these things, went over the whole
Okay.
application before we even submitted it, so it was blessed.
so you
before-
already knew the answer.
No, we don't, I mean, he said that,
Yeah.
no, well, he said that he believes that it is acceptable to put the parking for the cottage right next to it on the main, happens to be on the main house's
Yeah.
lot,
I think there's
With-
precedent, I think it's even in the code somewhere.
with some sort of legal, assurance that
Yeah,
that will remain there in perpetuity.
An
for the
easement of
cottage.
some sort, yeah.
It has to be an easement on the main deed that, just like you have.
On both deeds, really, right?
Probably on both.
Each won't have.
Yeah.
So the attorney should craft an easement, that's the term, right, that would describe that parking situation.
Is that the term?
Yeah.
That's up to the attorney.
That would please us.
Okay.
Whether that pleases the court, please don't infer that from this conversation.
I figured it may have come up in the past.
That's the
and
only
how
time
did you
I can
deal with it?
remember seeing it.
The non-anthem,
Yeah.
okay.
It wouldn't be any
Hasn't come up in
different
my
than
time, so.
And, before your time.
Yeah, it has not come up in my
You need to
time
go-
here, so.
You need to go back and read more of the history.
Yeah.
I guess so.
Or
History
right,
of the
But
planning board,
conceptually, it's really no different than if you grant somebody an easement for a right-of-way
to drive through.
to
Right.
drive through.
Which this property has across it to get to the cottage,
Right.
has an easement
Right.
already, yeah.
you just can't allow for the possibility that you've made this arrangement, it all looks good, and now one of the properties is sold.
That's exactly
Right,
right.
so
I mean,
Needs to be
the
encumbered.
fact is, someday those could be in different hands, and one would be without parking if not for that
Yeah.
legal easement. Right. So that's the way to do it. Okay,
think we
thank
could
you.
And with that, we would like to proceed on and read the findings of fact that were drafted in advance of this meeting,
Great, thank you.
in the thoughts that it was going to go as well as it has.
So this is the findings of fact for the application of Matthew Peter Flanagan Living Trust for removal of an existing dwelling and construction of a new two-story, non-conforming dwelling at 6 Edgewood Avenue. Following site plan reviews pursuant to the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance held on 19 March 2025 and 16 April 2025, and a public hearing held on 7 May 2025, the Kennebunkport Planning Board makes the following findings of facts and conclusion and renders the following decision subject to the continued conditions enumerated below. Findings of fact are as follows. The applicant is Matthew Peter Flanagan Living Trust, Matthew Flanagan and Margaret Flanagan trustees of 54 Sachem Road, Needham, Mass. 02494. In a letter dated 4 March 2025, the applicant authorized Peterson Design Group to act as their agent in this matter. Eric Peterson of Peterson Design Group represented the applicant in all discussions before the planning board. The property is located on 6 Edgewood Avenue, Kennebunkport, Maine, 04046. The property is identified as map 35, block 21, lot 3 in Goose Rock Zone on municipal tax assessor's maps. Because the property is located within the 100-year floodplain adjacent to tidal waters, it is also overlaid by the Resource Protection Zone. The lot is 2,621.9 square feet, which is 0.1 acres, per information supplied by the applicant. The applicant demonstrated a legal interest in the property by providing a warranty deed for the property conveyed to Matthew Peter Flanagan Living Trust, 50% interest, and the Margaret Megan Flanagan Living Trust, 50% interest, on 4 December 2024, which was recorded in the York County Registry of Deeds, book 19567, page 155. The existing property is a small parcel sandwiched between Edgewood and Bellevue Avenues with a non-conforming wood dwelling built on a concrete foundation. Sited with a larger setback from Edgewood Avenue, the existing dwelling has a rear porch that partially encroaches on the town's right-of-way on Bellevue Avenue, and the lowest finished floor elevation is 11.44 feet, which is non-compliant with the town's current minimum requirements of 12 feet. In an application dated 4 March 2025, the applicant is proposing to demolish the existing structure, which has lot coverage of 792.8 square feet, including the foundation and overhangs, but excluding the utilities and features, and build a new single-family dwelling with no larger lot coverage. The existing utilities and features, propane tank, generator, and small storage sheds represent an incremental lot coverage of 43.4 square feet. The applicant proposes to reuse and resite the current propane tank and generator on the property, but will consume no more than the existing lot coverage for such purposes. The new structure will be repositioned to roughly the center of the parcel and erected with a lowest finished floor elevation of 12.5 feet. The new structure will have a flow-through foundation with flood vents. The design will take advantage of the 30% upward expansion provisions, mostly in volume, by adding an attic for mechanical space. The new structure will fall under the height restriction, under the 30% expansion restriction, and under the 30% area allowance. While the new dwelling will still fail to meet all of the town's minimum setback requirements because of the small lot size, it will be less non-conforming by addressing both the current structure's right-of-way encroachment and the inadequate minimum base elevation. The driveway will be relocated from the side of the property closest to the ocean to the side furthest from the ocean and reconfigured to accommodate 2 cars instead of 1 without increasing the driveway's lot coverage footprint. The applicant expects to tie in the new structure into existing sewer, water, and electrical service connections without modifications. Pursuant to the requirements of Article 1010A of the Land Use Ordinance, the planning board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes negative ruling on one or more of the following identified findings, which would otherwise compel denial. And I'm not gonna read those, but A, B, C, D are all yes. In D, there is a note. D is the provisions for buffers and on-site landscaping provide for adequate protection to neighboring properties from detrimental features of the development. Finding is yes. There's a note, the generator and propane tank will be relocated from the new structure's foundation and closer to neighbor's property line, but they will be appropriately shielded with native landscaping. Sections E and F are both yes, but F, which is the provision for vehicular loading and unloading and parking and for vehicular pedestrian circulation on the site and onto adjacent public streets, will not create hazards to the safety. Finding is yes, but there's a note. The applicant intends to commence the project in late summer 2025 to lessen the impact of construction on neighboring properties during the summer season. The agent, who has experience working on projects in the Goose Rock zone, has stated they have a note on construction drawings that no construction vehicles can be left on the town's right-of-way or on neighbors' properties. Items G, H, I, J, K, and L, M, N, O, and P are all yes. Item 13, when a proposed development is located within the shoreland or resource protection zones, as this is, in addition to the requirements of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance outlined in 12 above, the approval of the development also requires that the board make positive findings based on the information presented that the proposed use, A, will maintain safe and healthful conditions, finding yes. B, will not result in water pollution, erosion, or sedimentation to surface waters, finding is yes. C, will adequately provide for disposal of all wastewater, finding is yes. D, will not have an adverse impact on spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, bird or other wildlife habitats, the finding is yes. E, will conserve shore cover and visual as well as actual points of access to inland coastal waters, finding is NA. F, will protect archaeological and historic resources as designated in the comprehensive plan, the finding is NA. G, will avoid problems associated with the floodplain development and use, finding is yes. H, is in conformance with the performance standards set forth in section 5.6 of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance, finding is yes, and the note is erosion control measures are incorporated into the demolition and construction plans. Conclusions. Article 10.10A of the Land Use Ordinance mandates that the planning board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes one or more identified findings that would otherwise compel denial. And as noted above, the board makes no such findings. Decision. The site plan application identified above is hereby approved. Conditions of approval. Number 1, the applicant pursuant to 10.12E shall notify the planning board prior to the transfer of rights to construct an approved project. Number 2, the applicant must record a copy of this decision and provide proof of such recordation in the York County Registry of Deeds before any permits may be issued or before any construction activity may commence. Number 3, any exterior lighting on the new structure shall conform to Chapter 245 of the town's exterior lighting ordinance, and details of any proposed exterior fixtures shall be supplied to the code enforcement officer with the building permit application. And item 4, the applicant shall comply with all the terms and conditions of the Town of Kennebunkport ordinances including section 219, which is floodplain management, as well as the main DEP approvals prior to issuance of a building permit.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Nicely done.
You did a nice job. All right, that concludes item number 2 on the evening. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you all.
Good luck with that project.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Looks like a lot of fun.
Good luck.
And if everyone's able to stay for a couple minutes after adjournment, I'll roll out the large plans on the table over there. We also have the
sign.
condo plat for the housing trust, so got a couple things to sign, and I think it will be less bumpy on that table than on this table.
That sounds good. I have one other item I just wanted to ask the board to think about, and maybe ask Peter for his opinion in particular. Peter just wrote his first draft findings of fact, and I thought did just a super job. You smashed it, fella, but it was a lot of work. And we talked briefly in the past about the possibility of having a template or multiple templates. Have you changed your opinion, or you refined your opinion after having this first experience?
This is my second experience, actually, but.
Okay.
I have 2 comments. You know, we went in the last 2 meetings, last one I was out of town, didn't, but I have watched the video a
Right.
couple times. About kind of whether it's 245, the lighting, or it's the signage, or
219?
or it's 219. I mean, all of these requirements are embedded in the land, in the code, in the town's code, and must be met before building permits can be issued and certificate of occupancies can be issued, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
And that being the case, I'm not sure I understand why our findings of fact, acknowledging all of that, shouldn't be focused on where we've made waivers and what conditions we've put, and literally nothing more. I mean, it would be more efficient to do, and would perhaps focus our line of questioning and everything else. And it's not as if I don't think these findings of fact exist in a vacuum. I mean, I envision that these findings of fact are put on top of the plans, of the application, of kind of the whole litany of paperwork that's involved in this approval. And so they don't really need to stand on their own so much as acknowledge that, you know, with all that below, this is what we found. And it does, they still have to comply with all the code, but we accept for, you know, these things that we've waived or these conditions we've made.
Yeah, if it's, we waived it or we added it.
Yeah.
Mike, microphone, Mike? Way up
I
there.
agree that it's either something that we've either waived or added should be the only additional. We shouldn't be repeating a requirement that's in there, because it is kind of odd to repeat some but not others.
It seems like it diminishes the ones that we don't mention specifically, and that's not, I don't think that's our intent.
I'd make one other comment on that. I was very interested in trying to create a really solid template that people could use and have this process be a lot quicker.
Yeah.
For them. And actually went on ChatGPT this afternoon, in 14 seconds, you know, with a guided question about a template for findings of fact in the town of Kennebunkport, Maine. You know, it spit out a remarkable, I have a copy of it if you'd like to see it.
No kidding, yeah.
It spit out a remarkable thing. It's not perfect. And I'm in the process of going through but it had some nice formatting stuff that I really liked. And so I'm happy to discuss it offline, but I think if we could get that kind of blank sheet format, and then people could add in and again focus on things we've accepted or waived, then it would speed the process. And I don't think it has any detrimental impact on the work that Nadia and Galen do, nor the work that the code enforcement officer has to do at the end of the day, because they have to confirm compliance with the whole.
Well, in fairness, we certainly wouldn't want it to have any
No.
deleterious effect, but I would want them to say that as well, to confirm that.
Fair
Yeah,
enough.
yeah,
So Galen's here to talk a little bit about the conditions,
Yeah, yeah.
as they
Let me just say that
apply to us.
I really didn't want to delve deep in this tonight, but your remarks are very helpful, and I wanted to make sure, was the board open to having such a template?
I think it helps with the consistency from.
Not forgetting things.
Yeah, well, from one to the other,
Okay.
the consistency, it's good. And then even to when the code enforcement officer or whoever looks
Yeah.
at it in the future, they're the same. He knows where to look, knows what's there, and there isn't anything obscuring or,
Yeah, this looks a lot like the last one,
Yeah.
right? Check,
Yeah.
check, check, yeah, yeah,
as I'm always a proponent of.
okay.
I think a template's great. I think that would streamline the process. I think maybe the way to look at this is, let's get a template with what we currently have, right? With all of
Yeah.
because I think Peter's point is a good point that, this isn't a standalone document, and so maybe you would enhance a little bit, based upon a review of, because it just says site plan typically in the findings of fact. So you may want to just increase the sort of reference to, we've reviewed the site plan, we've reviewed engineering drawings, we've reviewed a report from Acorn. So I mean, if you incorporate by
Similar to what's at the
reference.
bottom of the planning board note.
Exactly.
Almost a checklist of here's the things that we've looked, well, we didn't look at that, well, we did look at that, yeah, yeah.
And then,
Tied into that
Yep.
memo we get, yeah.
and that way it's all bundled up. So it's a complete standalone, not a standalone document, it's a packet. And it demonstrates what you've reviewed as a board and the
Yeah.
conclusions and findings of fact that you've drawn.
I think we need to be careful to not make it as big as a packet. It does need to be concise, and it does get elevated above all of these other materials that we have here, and that it's the one that gets filed in the registry. And 5 years from now, when I go say, what the heck did we decide? I can always find the findings of fact and a sheet or two of the plan documents, the ones we're gonna go over there and sign. But all of this other material, I have to go up to town hall for that. And
So the application itself is not a part of that?
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that does not get put in the registry.
Okay.
Well, that's even more of a good reason to reflect that you reviewed it in the finding of facts.
Correct,
Because
correct.
it's not there.
That's right.
And I think what I had thought too with the last couple of these, that is as opposed to listening, to your point, and you wanna make it as, brief as possible, and as opposed to listing all of, like in, 13, when a proposed development is located within shoreland or resource protection zone outlined in 12 above, approval of the development also requires the board make positive findings based on the information, and then, A through H, you might just wanna, maybe we could just have a statement, we don't have to list them all out. And again, that's my first sort of swing at this.
Oh, it's interesting you say that, because when I was looking at Peters, this one I spent a little more time on than I might normally, because I thought it was your first one. If I'd known it was your second, I would have just blessed it. But if you go look at the land use ordinance, it doesn't list A, B, C, D. It lists 1 through 16. Now, when did that happen? And it must have, I assume, at some point it diverted in the next ones. And why couldn't we consider at least something that succinctly captured, yes, all of these are in the affirmative from 240, 1010B, except for, it does have a place for notes and the like, and we need to consider that to the extent it's useful. But I know I hate sounding off at the meeting and I'm reading this and everyone's eyes are saying, oh, come on.
I think to tie it into the statute
Yeah,
specifically, again, that.
bring it up a little.
And it also, if it's ever looked at or questioned, it also removes any doubt that instead of, A, B, C through K, If the statute has, subpart B 1 through 16 or 1
Yeah.
through 12, it's just right there. You can't.
That's right.
There's no argument that can be made that, well, did you look at part A? Was that an old
Yeah.
part of the statute?
Is C really 3 or?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The words of A really refer to B or 2. No, so I think I think that would streamline the process and make it
All right.
impactful and.
So I, for one, would like to, maybe I'd like to do two things. I'd like to hear from Galen tonight, who apparently is on the line, and would say something about his feelings on on conditions. And then two, maybe the next action is to take a look at this, at a next meeting, maybe, take a look at this GPT, maybe modified as you've,
Fantastic tool.
what I don't want to look at it and say, well, no, this is just what GPT did, and yeah, of course, it's
No,
got some clunkiness.
I've already
Use it
modified
as a basis.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
use it as a
Yeah.
base. It does.
You remember, what happens is, and what happened this time is, oh, this one's a little different because it's in the resource protection zone, and so this section applies, and, oh, this is
Well, I
a
think you have to build
subdivision.
that in, and if it doesn't apply, you
Yeah.
just delete it.
That's right, okay. As long as we comprehend
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Galen's on the phone. Galen.
Galen, how are you?
I'm doing well. We're dividing and conquering tonight. You guys had a very rigorous discussion today. You did a good job. I appreciate the discussion regarding the need for a template for findings of facts, and certainly staff would support that endeavor because it is challenging for new members and veteran seasoned members too to figure out what sections are applicable, which ones aren't. I would just offer some feedback, some just caution about referencing all land use ordinance provisions, as the planning board is generally the one that's reviewing this in your purview as site plan review for findings of facts. And so with changes in the law, because this is recorded in the Registry of Deeds, we just want to make sure that we don't catch ourselves with new provisions that are added into the ordinance. And that's why, we recommend just making sure that waivers are clearly listed there on what the reference land use ordinance sections are. And, which ones have conditions attached to them, and make it as specific as possible since it is a historic document. So the reason I say this from an administrative perspective is when the land use ordinance changes, now when we're trying to enforce something years later, now we have to go dig the old ordinance and try to figure out what sections were applicable at the time. So
Version
I would
control.
caution against doing that,
State
but that's, again, the purview of the board. So
No, that's a good point.
any questions that you might have.
Yep. It's not,
So
not
Galen, just to kind of repeat that and make sure I understand it. So to the extent we are waiving conditions or we are waiving provisions or including conditions, there should be a relevant citing of the ordinance that we're dealing with.
That's correct. You should be referencing whenever there's a waiver request, it should be saying, we're waiving the tree survey requirement, and it's this section of the site plan application. And so I would try to follow the planner's memo when you have that. That's the useful guide for you, and certainly we can send this as a Word document if it helps you to do copy and paste instead of typing all these different references. But certainly that would be my recommendation, is to make it as specific as possible for what waivers are being requested. And then the conditions, if you're saying we want the code office to administer this with a building permit application, such as exterior lighting, that's always a common one. Floodplain, because the board doesn't have that much expertise in floodplain, looking at those plans, just stating that it needs to be in compliance with the floodplain management ordinance when it comes in for the building permit. As referenced in chapter 210, that would be applicable. So I would just keep it as targeted as you can, because again, sometimes those sections change over time.
Galen, could you say something to address our thought, the stated thought by several members that we put in an overarching statement that says all Kennebunkport town ordinances, and the state too, by the way, all Kennebunkport town offices must be adhered to. And then we're talking about whether to go on and say, we want you to pay particular attention to 219. We want you to pay particular attention to the lighting ordinance. And we're not going to mention all of the other 24 sections that we want you to adhere to, but we want, it seems like we're going down a path here that diminishes the importance of any ordinance we don't call out by number as a condition. And our preference would be to just say, no, all ordinances must be adhered to, and they're enforced by the Code Enforcement Office. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, the general statement, I would caution a little bit, because again, some of those performance standards do change over time. And that's what I'm a little concerned about, putting that statement in there where, let's say a project gets approved by the planning board. There were certain regulations that are in place whenever they were reviewed by the board, and so they were approved. Town adopts new standards a month later, and so now the board's looking, as a staff, we're looking at the findings of facts, and the findings of facts clearly state this generic, overarching, it needs to comply with all ordinances. Well, when it was originally approved, and I don't want to say it was grandfathered, it's been approved under the standards that were in place at the time. And so I just want to caution us from using that vague language.
No,
certainly, when they come in for their building permit application, we're going to make sure they apply to the standards that are administered with the Code Enforcement Office for a building permit application.
Of course.
If there's any of those standards that are dealing with planning board, with site plan review and those types of things, we just want to make sure we're not applying new standards to something that was previously.
Could we use the lighting condition that we just added to this findings that Peter just read? And as an explicit example of, we've added it on request with the thought that it must help somehow, but it's not clear to me, and I think on the others, why it's helpful for the code enforcement officer to have something in the findings that says, pay particular attention to the lights that are listed when the building application is applied. My gut is that that's done routinely. And if the planning board is pointing it out, it implies more. Or what's leading you to suggest that we add that?
Yes, so under your site plan review standards, it clearly states that when a site plan application is coming before the board, that Chapter 245 is reviewed by the planning board. You all did not review, the planning board, we did not, review any luminaire design standards. We didn't look at, any site plan layout that had infiltration of light on neighboring properties. None of that was done by the planning board during a site plan review process. So what we're saying is, we understand that this was not reviewed during the planning board meeting, but we are deferring this to the to the code enforcement officer to handle this administratively when the application comes before for a building permit. So that's all that's referring to. It's because the planning board does have the authority to review that standard. We just chose to do this administratively. Does that help?
But that's not what it says, right? It just says this standard should be complied with. It doesn't say the planning board chose to not review, or it was not in a position to review that particular standard. I'm comfortable if we say that. Therefore, this should be, the code enforcement officer should pay particular attention to it. I think we don't specifically say that in the findings of facts, do we? That we didn't review a standard. We just say, pay particular attention to the light, which I think I agree with Ed's point that why are you just calling out one particular standard, right?
So let me try to answer my own question now. And I'll do it without, because I don't have the ordinance in front of me, but I do have the site plan memo that Galen's team gives us. And item 13 on tonight's says, lighting details indicating type of fixtures, location, radius, and intensity of light to comply with Chapter 245 lighting outdoor. Now, I'm guessing that if I go look at that in the context of the land use ordinance, what Galen just said is, it's in a section that says, the planning board shall confirm. And that we're remiss in not doing that, and so we have covered that by a condition that says it's gonna get covered later.
I
So,
don't
so
think
we
you've
cover
covered
it.
it. I don't think
Correct.
you've covered it unless you specifically say in the document that you have not reviewed that standard for this reason. You don't cover things, I think, by just pushing it off to the code enforcement officer, right? I mean, if we have a duty to cover it, we need to review it. And then if we don't review it, I think we need to clearly state that we didn't review it for whatever reason, and then that particular attention needs to be paid to it by the code enforcement, or this is a condition that the lighting standard will be met, right? And that will be inspected or certified, whatever the right term is, by the code enforcement officer.
Galen, is there a solution to this where we basically bring it to the attention of the applicant in the application process itself? And make sure that part of their application process includes section 245? And they need to demonstrate that like they need to demonstrate everything else, and put the onus on them from the get-go.
Or make a statement in the application that all lighting will comply with section 245.
Or to tie, and I think this is what's going on, to tie the application form more closely to this memo to planning board.
Yeah, I
In
think
other
that's a
words,
great- I think
if
that's a
those
great-
were aligned so that it was, if you didn't have the chair of the planning board saying, oh, is that my job? You know, like the fact that I can do that after 4 years in this job, I guess to some degree speaks to my mental acuity, but I think it also talks to our process not being tight.
For the record, our planning board site plan application does have all of these application requirements listed in the document. People don't usually print those out for you
I don't
because
see them. Why don't?
if you looked online on the website where people get the application, you'll see that the application requirements are included in the document. People don't usually print that out for you because they don't write anything on it. It's just clerical for them basically, but it is included in our application documents.
So it wouldn't be hard to make it into a checklist where the applicant affirmed that he has met those requirements in the application. Rather than us looking here at, after the fact, a memo that says, hey, you didn't include this information. And he says, well, what information was that now? I mean, it seems like a big circle.
It's gotta do it at some point, right?
Yeah, you have
So
to figure
might
out.
as well
do
do
it
it
up
in the
front.
front end.
Okay,
So,
one more question. I think you answered my question about why 245. And I got some homework to do to understand it better. And then Joe makes the point of, okay, given that was the why, maybe our answer wasn't as crisp as it should have been, you know. What about 219, floodplain management? Is there something that says that the planning board shall review compliance with 219?
Yes, so where it is under section 240-10.7. It states that this is the performance standards. All site plan applications shall conform with townwide standards in Article 6, and the standards for specific activities and land uses and zones were applicable in Article 7. Article 6 references the floodplain ordinance.
That's the only ordinance that is germane in all of that?
It's Article 6, yes. That would be where the floodplain ordinance comes into effect. And then your Article 7 is your performance standards for particular uses,
All I'm
which isn't
saying,
used as often in our staff review because it's not that a certain use isn't, applicable to a site plan application.
Galen, is there anywhere where it says the planning board shall review compliance with 219?
All site plan applications shall conform with the townwide standards in Article 6 and the standards for specific uses in Article 7 of this chapter. In addition, where applicable, site plans shall also conform to the following standards, and it has a bunch of other standards there. So that's
So why are we singling out 219? I guess is, you know where I'm going with this.
because 219 is in Article 6.
So, somebody else make a run at this to the,
Yeah,
am I-
I think.
Article 6 is your townwide standards for the land use ordinance. So that includes your height restrictions, your setback requirements, your lot coverage requirements. Those are all listed in Article 6.
So to Ed's point, I think, and Peter's point, why don't we list height requirement, setback requirement, lot coverage? We don't do that. We just call out certain, so I think what we need to do is integrate all of the pieces of paper
Yeah.
together. And then the findings of facts should reflect the sequence of all of the site plan application, and then it should all be uniform. It should, one should support the other, and not, this is very circular, and if you have 4 people here and 2 professional staff folks trying to explain it to us, and we're scratching our head, imagine what a regular sort of person, if they ever question this or challenged it, well, this is subsidiary of 214, is 219.
we had 2 very bright professionals here tonight,
That's what
you know, and
they're doing their best to explain it to
they're
us.
clearly trying.
None of
to
us
do-
are, it's not clicking, at least with me.
Their job depends on them doing this as
I
smoothly as
just
they
think we ought
can.
to throw the onus back on the applicant.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if it's not clear to us, then we can't throw it usefully back on them.
I don't think the requirements aren't,
219 isn't, to me. To me,
So I
that's
think,
nebulous.
if I may make a recommendation, I think it would be best for us to read Article 10, which is your site plan review process,
Right?
as homework for all of us to do, and then we can understand what the requirements are after reading.
Could
Article
somebody
10.
put the latest copy of that on the portal,
Yes.
okay? So that it's all there, or send it to whatever, email it, because I'd like to see that document. and
Yeah,
what the
we can
most
send you a
current-
link.
make sure we're all looking at the same
Make
thing.
sure we're all looking at the same page,
Yeah.
right, to
Yep.
start.
It's in the town e-code, so
Well,
I'll
it's in the
send out a
E-code,
link.
right? It's
to
not
the-
different
Yeah.
from what's on the E-code.
Is it?
I would use the E-codes. It's very user-friendly to use. If you haven't already
That's
used
where
it,
I've
I
been
can
going.
show you where it's
That's
at.
what I've been doing
Okay.
too, so if that's fine.
But you're right to challenge it.
Yeah, I wanna see what,
Make sure we're going the right place.
everybody needs to be on the same sheet of paper, and then that's the starting point, and then you move forward. And I agree, the onus of this should be on the applicant. I mean, I know when Eric Peterson designed
They want it to be.
my house, he had a
Gonna
lighting
be at some
plan.
point.
And the lighting plan had to be submitted to the code enforcement office so it's not an unreasonable request to say, here's 245, right? Is that what it is?
Yep.
Yeah.
You need to have a lighting plan. Or you need to promise to have a lighting plan by the time you build a house, and that's a condition.
Condition, right.
That gets the code enforcement officer needs to approve, whoever the appropriate full-time staff person is, they need to make sure that the lighting plan and is ultimately put into the house complied. Because even if you get a lighting plan and they certify it, it's still up to ultimately the code enforcement officer to determine this is the light that was on the plan, and what you actually put in doesn't violate the lighting code, right?
And we know that what we review here is a subset of all of the requirements that
Right.
will be met in the process of getting the building permit and getting it inspected and along the way, and then leading up to an occupancy permit. You don't want to set anything in motion that says, oh, as long as you do everything the planning board says, you're golden.
I agree, that's not what, I don't think anybody is saying.
No, we want to be careful, though, in saying, get all the requirements to get, well, maybe there's some that the planning board, it's implying that we should be looking at, that we shouldn't be looking at, or don't need to look at.
And that should be clearly reflected in the findings of facts, right? To say, hey,
You're right.
this is what we looked at, and this is what we approved, this is what we didn't look at, for whatever reason, it wasn't available, it wasn't presented, but we've conditionally approved this going forward.
Right.
So.
And to Galen's point, it does seem like we need to start by reviewing
I agree.
Article 10.
But I think at the end of the day, if we could have this filing requirements and checklist expanded to include those things.
Yeah.
from, on the front end, I think that would be an enormous time saver.
I-
And they
I
have to
agree.
do it anyway.
I agree with you. I think our audience would applaud us.
Yeah, and then it may cut down on the number of appearances that the people need to make here, because here's the document, this is what you need to do. You need to check all these boxes up front, and we're not gonna talk about the hammerhead driveway or
Right.
because you've done it, I think.
Also
Unless people
presumably
like it.
cuts down on your reviews. the
Exactly,
Staff's
the
reviews.
staff reviews, right?
Well,
We shouldn't be doing things redundantly. That's right.
And we shouldn't be burdening the staff with stuff that, I mean, if it's all up front, I would think, and clear, it'll facilitate quicker and easier review by everybody.
we would still review to make sure that they actually had met.
Of course you
Sure,
would.
sure, but
But-
that's after the fact, yeah.
Mhm.
Put the
Right.
energy there, yeah.
Yeah, we're not trying to take anybody's, the code officer or but
Yeah.
tying everything together from the base document of what is our obligation as a board from the site application on, and then the finding of facts and the application meld or mesh together, I think that might be something worth looking at.
Agreed.
Next time.
So with that, the only action I know of for next time is we all agreed, there's several, we all agreed to look at the tree.
Article 10.
Is there a tree ordinance?
I don't think there is, I think we heard there wasn't, but I think
Well,
there is a
it depends on how you
requirement
think
for
of
the
it.
planning board
I
to
think-
review this information that we're asking for.
So where do we look to find what statutory or town regulations apply to trees?
No, the question
It-
is, there is a requirement for the planning board, in the planning ordinance, for them to submit a tree survey.
Yeah,
I got it.
that's what I'm
But
hearing,
not-
that there
but
is,
not
but
what-
not for us to do anything particular with it.
Right.
Except it gives the,
Be aware.
basically, they submitted this survey, it gives the planning board an opportunity to see if there's large specimen trees, and you can make a condition, which you are allowed to do, to avoid those trees in construction.
Okay, where
So,
does it say that?
I've never
I
seen
looked
that.
over all of the vegetation, and I'm not totally dedicated my life to it, but I've given it a pretty good look. I can't find anywhere where it talks about if a tree is over X amount of
so
inches.
you'll find this in Article 10. So it's a submission requirement to submit that survey, and then
Right.
the planning board has the purview to add conditions that include,
But
land-
it's based on what we
vegetation.
feel, not a document.
I'm very uncomfortable as a planning board member to say to someone on their private property, there's a tree of certain diameter, and you can't cut it
I'm not gonna
down.
let you cut it, I think it's a law.
I
it's a
think
lawsuit
in this-
waiting to happen.
I just wanna know what basis there is for me as a planning board member to assert that.
I think the basis is that the reason that they come to planning board review is partly to ensure that their application is in the best interest of the community. And so you, as the planning board, sure, maybe a 10-inch tree, you're like, that doesn't matter, we're not gonna get involved in that. But if you have a huge tree on a property, you can say, we think this is of great value to the community and are going to put a condition that you aren't allowed to cut this as part of this project. So it's,
I got a problem with that.
It- so
Cut it
the-
for the road going, you can't cut it for the road going in, but when you build the house, we don't have. anything to say
I'm
you
not
can't cut it.
advocating that this is something you need to be doing, it just,
Right.
it's
It
there
makes
as
sense.
an option
Especially-
for the planning board.
I'm not,
Especially in this case where they've
Yeah.
working the damn road around the vernal pools and they don't have any.
but again.
And they asked for a submission requirement waiver, which the
Yeah.
board is allowed
I
to grant, you
would
guys are
grant that,
permitted
be in
to.
favor of granting
But to the
that.
point, and again, I'm belaboring this, and I'm sorry. We're acting as an administrative body for the town of Kennebunkport, the planning board, right? So what authority does the planning board have? And maybe there's a question for the city attorney, to say, you are a private property landowner. You have owned the land, this guy had it for 30 years. He might have planted the tree that's now grown to whatever size
8
and
inches.
width, or whatever, 8 inches. You can't cut that tree down to put a road in, to enjoy the full use. I
If-
don't see what
We
authority
don't
we
think
have
we
to
have
do
the
that.
authority
I don't
to
think
do
we
that.
have the authority to do it.
You do have the authority to do it, so
We don't-
if,
we
if
disagree.
if someone's coming for a planning board, a project that requires planning board approval, the use that they're looking to do is basically they're authorizing you to make that decision. You don't have to, but our ordinance language does allow you to make that condition regarding a specific tree. Now, if they want to avoid this, it is a little bit of an odd scenario. They can simply clear cut the lot before they submit a planning board application. This is allowed in our ordinance because we don't regulate the trees.
My head
But
is exploding right
It's,
now.
I think,
Because
we've talked to the board before that some of our planning board ordinances need some review. And I think that we'll go through the subdivision review and so forth, but we do, it's there as an option for you. So I'm not an attorney, but it is, per our ordinance, you are allowed to put conditions in regarding those
If we don't
items.
like something.
Yes. Well, depending on what that something is.
We've
So-
done it in the past for what type of windows you could put in and what type of herbicide you could use.
We have never put them in as conditions. We've put them in as findings that said that the applicant agreed.
I agree.
And we've deliberately done it that way because I didn't think, and I still don't believe we have the
don't.
authority to do that.
Yeah.
So I know, Nadia, we're disagreeing on this, but I'd be shocked and stunned if Attorney Chow agreed that we have that authority.
Again, you do have the authority to add conditions to the plan, and what Attorney Chow has mentioned in the past is that you would have to use the guidelines for your decision to justify any of those types of conditions that you have. And so those are listed in Article 10. Specifically, what I can say about is in past practice when they've protected certain trees, it's usually in critical resource habitat locations. It's not something that's just arbitrarily done for a lot that doesn't have some environmental significance of
Because
some
we
sort.
like big trees, right?
Well, it serves it serves an important resource for maybe some critical habitat
Sure.
on the site.
There's a
So we don't
ivory-billed
want to just do it
woodpecker.
arbitrarily, like, oh, we don't like this developer or this development, so we're just going to put it in. But there has to be a thoughtful, methodical reason for why you're putting that condition in place.
Well, and one that's defensible in a court case.
Right. Yep.
Now, it's serious business. I just want to be careful. Okay, with that, I would like to move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Adjourn. We are going to sign some documents.
Yes, I'll go roll out
Nadia.
some plans.
Here.
For instance,
Thank you, David. We're off.